Welcome back to MFO, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This video has been a long time coming, going all the way back to the Elite Series event that was on the St. Lawrence River. And we saw that fish care just was pretty atrocious, to be honest, from a lot of the elite anglers. A lot of fish that were being caught deep and that were not being properly taken care of and not being released where they were floating up to the surface. I've gotten, and then 2 weeks ago, I was at a tournament on Lake Geneva, just kind of jumped into a tournament where we were literally instructed by the tournament director to fizz our fish if we were catching deep fish. And if we couldn't fizz them, we should come back and that he would do it for us. And then thirdly, I've been getting just a ton of comments from you guys about fish care and how to do it properly. And the fact that we're seeing a lot of pros not really pay attention to that aspect of the game. So stick around, guys. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Mark Fisher Outdoors, everybody. I am Mark Fisher, and we're talking about fish care. And again, before we get into how to handle fish properly when it comes to releasing them after the tournament or when you're culling, we need to talk a little bit about what's going on. We're talking about fish that have been caught out of deep water, typically smallmouth, but it can be smallmouth, largemouth, or spotted bass that are being caught in depths that are, my experience is 18 feet or deeper. If you're catching a fish that's 18 feet or deeper, what you're doing is you're having an impact on that fish's swim bladder. And I've heard a lot of different videos, seen a lot of different videos, and they don't really cover this properly. So I'm gonna try and explain this the best way I know how. I think many of you know that I'm a certified scuba diver, and there's two elements in scuba diving that relate to this issue, but they relate in different ways. So I'm gonna talk first about our lungs, okay? Human lungs. We know that scuba divers, when they dive down and they get to certain depths, we have to come up slowly. We have to continue to breathe. And the idea is we don't want our lungs to be expanded at a depth. And then as we come up, when that water pressure decreases, our lungs overexpand, which causes what's called the bends, overexpansion, and that's a very serious problem. That's how water pressure relates to our lungs. The fish's swim bladder doesn't have anything to do with breathing or their lungs, but it does have to do with their buoyancy. And it has to do with water pressure. So when a fish is at 18 feet or deeper, that swim bladder has been deflated to the point where that fish can be comfortable down in those depths. Again, I'm going to repeat that, deflated. What happens when you hook that fish and bring that fish up from 20 feet of water up to the surface is that the amount of water pressure that is being put on that swim bladder is significantly decreased, which means that that swim bladder, which did not have very much air in it, is now overinflating. It is inflating, and it's inflating due to the fact that the water pressure is much less than it was when it was 20 feet deep. A largemouth bass or a smallmouth bass's swim bladder is a closed system. It's not like other fish where they can increase the gas or decrease the gas through the mouth or the anus. It is diffused. The oxygen goes into the swim bladder through the bloodstream. And so oxygen is diffused into the swim bladder or out of the swim bladder. It's a slow process, a much slower process. And so you pull that fish up from 20 feet deep, that water pressure is much less. That oxygen increases in size because there's less pressure on it, and that fish cannot react to it and simply expel that gas. And that gas is now overinflating the swim bladder, which now what happens is you put your fish into the live well and it's belly up in the live well because of that overinflation of oxygen in the swim bladder. When that happens and that fish is belly up in the live well, it can't diffuse that oxygen. It needs some water pressure to begin that process of diffusing the oxygen out of the swim bladder and back into the bloodstream. That's why there are two resources to be able to do that. One is fizzing, and we're going to talk about fizzing in another episode. That is a very intrusive method of actually releasing the gases in the swim bladder. It can be done quickly. It can be done safely if you know what you're doing. It can also do quite a bit of damage if you do it incorrectly. What I prefer to do is just use fin clips. And here's why. If you take 2 fin clips, that's what these are right here, just alligator clips with a heavy 2-ounce weight on the bottom, and you take these fin clips and you attach these fin clips to the pelvic fin of the fish. And I'm saying 2 of them, and I'll explain. If you take and put 1 fin clip on each pelvic fin of the fish, what you're doing is you're providing enough weight for that fish to be put in your live well, and this will keep your fish upright, meaning belly down, vertical, but in the bottom of your live well. And I realize, guys, and I know that a lot of people are going to say this. They're going to say, well, wait a minute. You're taking a fish out of 18 feet of water, 20 feet of water, and you're putting him in 2 feet of water in your live well. That's not enough water pressure. Think about this for just a second, okay? All you're doing is starting the process of diffusing that swim bladder, the oxygen in that swim bladder, back into the bloodstream of the bass. Take a gallon of water, lay on the ground, and put a gallon of water on your chest. You feel the pressure. You don't need 20 gallons, 200 gallons of pressure. You just need to have some of that pressure, and the fish can start to diffuse the oxygen in the swim bladder back into the bloodstream. So much so, guys, that I have seen this to the point where you take 2 fin clips, put them on the pelvic fin, put the bass into the live well. The fish will stay at the bottom of the live well, stay vertical, and at the end of your fishing day, you'll go back and these fish are swimming around, they're lively, especially smallmouth, and those fin clips have come off and they're laying at the bottom of your live well. Because what'll happen is, as they're sitting vertically and down at the bottom, they're becoming more comfortable. They're expelling that gas through the bloodstream. And as they do that, they become more lively and they're ready to go. And that's what happens using fin clips. I would much prefer to do that than getting in there and doing surgery on a fish with a needle. I will do it. I have fizzed fish, but this is a much more non-intrusive way to care for your fish. Let's talk about a couple of other things. There are times when you will catch a fish, but you're not going to put them in the live well. You're catching them and you're releasing them. And you release the fish, and that fish is floating on the surface and can't get itself down to the depths. That may be a time when you choose to fizz that fish. Another option might be to go ahead and put that fish in your live well with some clips for an hour, let them get reacclimated, and begin that process of diffusing that oxygen in the swim bladder. Then you can release them. Or depending on the strength, remember, all the fish needs to do is be able to get to the 20-foot depth or whatever depth they came from, and then that water pressure will shrink the swim bladder down to its original size. So if they can do that muscularly by swimming down, they'll be fine. So if the fish is flapping or flopping up at the surface and can't get himself righted to get to the point where he can swim down, you can literally release the fish by kind of forcing them down, actually putting them into the water, kind of like a torpedo, nose first, get them to get started with that first 2 feet of being headed towards the surface, let them take over that process by swimming their tail fin and getting down. That's another option, depending on what you see in terms of how stressed the fish is caught. If it was a tremendous fight that took a long time and that fish doesn't have a lot of energy to be able to swim himself down to 20 feet, my suggestion is put some fin clips on, keep him in your live well for a little bit of time, let him recoup, and then release him. Or go to fizzing. And again, we'll talk about fizzing in another episode. Guys, I hope this information helps. I think this is information, quite honestly, that a lot more pros need to pay attention to. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd appreciate it if you would send those along in the comments section. We look forward to tomorrow, which is Underwater Wednesday, and we will see you then. Take care, everybody.